Hello and a very warm welcome to Political Economy with Shweta Punj. Well, it is election season once again in India. There's a heated electoral battle playing out in the country's second most populous state, which is the state of Bihar. The battle seems to be whose freebie or whose reverie is better. Is my handout bigger or better than yours? Well, that's the crux of the electoral battle that we've seen play out in Bihar. In this episode of Political Economy, we question whether doles, handouts, freebies, reveries get votes, or are Indian citizens more discerning than that? Do reveries, do freebies damage democracy and electoral process further? Do they nudge the voters to look at short-term gains rather than evaluating governments or parties on their performance? Well, not surprisingly, elections in Bihar have witnessed a war of freebies to get votes. Bihar, of course, is also one of the poorest states, which means that the idea of getting something free becomes even more appealing. The main opposition bloc, the Mahagathbandhan, has made several promises, one of them being one government job per family within 20 days of government formation. The NDA has promised 1 crore jobs and 1 crore Lakhpati Didis. Besides that, there is a promise of highways and airports and medical colleges. Well, before voting began in the state of Bihar, the Nitish Kumar government transferred 10,000 rupees to 75 lakh women under the Mukhyamantri Mahila Rozgar Yojana. Well, to dive deeper into have freebies become the new normal? Would these freebies actually benefit the voters, the residents of Bihar, or will they actually ruin the state further? You have to remember that the state is already spending nearly 80% of its revenues on salaries and pensions alone. I have with me noted economist and author of How We Vote, Factors That Influence Voters, Mr. Surjit Bhalla, and Gaurav Chaudhary, consulting editor of Network 18. Dr. Bhalla and Gaurav, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Political Economy. It is every election it just makes you sit up in shock, right? So this Bihar election, once again, I think it's taken the bar higher where freebies are concerned. Now we are talking about one government job per family. We are talking about cash transfers and whatnot. Dr. Bhalla, you've been spending time in Bihar. Is the narrative, are the political parties capturing what the average Bihari wants? Is this what the average Bihari is looking at? A government job and some cash in their bank?
Well, I don't know what the average Bihari is looking for, but in your preamble, you made 2 points. You made several points, but two that I would like to comment on. And the first and the most important point is, do freebies make a difference to the
Yes.
voting behavior? Now, traveling to Bihar and having studied the economy and studied the electoral process, I don't think, and in particular in Bihar, I don't think freebies matter for the vote at all. So, which is why I question, what do people vote for? On what basis do they vote? They vote on the basis of the past performance of the party in power, the incumbent, the future promises of the party in power, and the expectation of the party in opposition. Now, the reason, and whether we look at Maharashtra or any other state, the reason the BJP, the NDA, is doing very well, and we'll find out on Bihar what happens in I guess, 2, 3 days. And I could be wrong, in which case, mea culpa, and we can discuss this again. is because the opposition is not offering anything. Whereas you have a known record of Nitish Kumar for the last 20 years. And I believe in terms of the poor and in terms of infrastructure and in terms of electricity, water, etc., they have done a tremendously good job. So I'll be shocked if they're not re-elected with a majority, which is why I believe that this entire business of so many jobs and 10,000 rupees per woman, etc., is was and is completely unnecessary. There are alternatives that you could do, and that the government has done, that Nitish has done. Remember, he came up with the bicycles and so on and so forth. Productive doles. This thing is, and is in the garb, mind you, that, oh, it's some people say it's a loan, and the BJP itself, their commentators say that which mother's son can, or no mother's son can tell you that it is a loan. So they, on the one hand, they say it's a loan. On the other hand, they say that, look, don't be so foolish to think it's a loan. So I think, it's unfortunately, this is no way to Viksit Bharat. So therefore, I am quite opposed to the doles. I'm not that opposed to productive performance, which is what the Bihar has done over the last 20 years. Now we are at the tail end of Nitish reign, I guess. It's his last hurrah. Age is also a factor. But I think the opposition, in my view, has nothing to offer. That's why we're getting surprised that a person who is, reads out his speeches rather than on a campaign, but will still get voted in because the opposition is so bad. So I would say, look at the opposition. What are they offering? Do they have any credibility? And in my view, it's two dynas. And I think they have not recognized, the opposition, is that the days of dynas are over. And people rebel against that.
Right. Okay, so that's interesting. You've spent time in Bihar. You've written an entire book on, what do really voters vote for. And from what you're saying, voters don't vote for freebies. Having said that, all political parties seem to believe that voters do vote for freebies because that is the narrative that we end up seeing play out every election. Let me also bring in Gaurav Chaudhary here. Gaurav, when we look at the state of Bihar's economy, Dr. Bhalla just said that there's been a lot of work that's happened in Bihar. That's probably right. I have not been to Bihar, so I cannot comment on that. However, having said that, we do know that it continues to be one of the poorer states in terms of per capita income. It's lower than the national average. In fact, 1/3 of the national average. So, when we talk about Bihar's economy, Gaurav, what are the key challenges that you see? Because now this competitive federalism has really taken new levels of competition. You look at what the southern states are offering. You look at what Mr. Yogi Adityanath is trying to do in Uttar Pradesh. But in Bihar, it seems to be the same old narrative.
Absolutely. No, Shweta, I just take on from what Dr. Bhalla said. A productive job is the best form of inclusion, and I don't think any political party can deny that. Any kind of freebies, in my views, are just promissory notes that are announced in election, and it comes at a serious fiscal cost. But having said that, I'll just digress for a minute or so from your question. I'll come back to the state of the economy of Bihar in a moment. But during this election, however, there seems to be some signs of a transformation that is on the way. If you look at the manifesto of Mahagathbandhan, led by, of course, the Rashtriya Janata Dal, and Tejashwi being the face of it, it marks some kind of a departure from the party's traditional emphasis on caste empowerment. I see signs of trying to become caste plus. So instead of complete emphasis on caste, Instead, the coalition has chosen to prioritize governance and development. At least there are signs, and there's some signs in the phraseology that they're using here, with focus on jobs, financial empowerment for women, and law and order. And I would like to believe that this shift is not merely a tactical maneuver, but probably a recognition of the evolving political reality in Bihar, where caste identity is no longer going to be the sole determinant of electoral outcomes. And if that actually plays out in reality, that's a good sign for primarily because for decades, caste has been the fulcrum of Bihar's electoral politics, and all of us know that. The RJD, under the leadership of Lalu Prasad, built its foundations on the principles of social justice and empowerment of the oppressed communities, the EBC politics.
Right.
However, in the new generation, if the party tweaks its stance, and then probably it's a sign that they're acknowledging that mandal politics, as it was practiced for 3 decades now, is finally reaching a sunset stage. So that has become more nuanced than what it was before. So that is one part of it. But however, you did say and very rightly so, that Bihar is India's poorest state, at least in terms of per capita income, 66,000 now compared to it's 1.88 lakh for nationally. And now, if you look at the numbers, if you do a disaggregated analysis, there's some very interesting numbers which are very worrisome also. Between 2017, 18, and 23, 24, that is 5 years, there's a significant shift, structural shift that you can see in non-farm jobs, and that is the primary marker of an economy that is trying to industrialize. The share of persons working in services sector actually plummeted, which is the opposite of what's happening in the rest of the country. Plummeted from 30.4% in 17-18 to about 23% in 23, 24,
Right.
while manufacturing also dipped. And the massive dip in manufacturing and services actually has been largely or almost entirely been absorbed by agricultural sector, which share of working population increased from 44% to more than 50% now. This is clearly a sign of underemployment and livelihood distress. So,
Right.
in Bihar, the manufacturing sector actually presents some kind of a paradox. It's a structural paradox. Just two numbers tell that. One, the number of registered factories fell from about 3,400 in 17-18 to 3,300 in FY23, but the total number of people engaged rose by nearly 14,000, climbing from about 1.21 lakh to about 1.35 lakh during that same period. So, interestingly, 9% of the population in Bihar was in regular employment in 23-24. It's fallen.
Yeah.
It has fallen 13% in 5 years. There are significant signs of distress, and I think that is now you're beginning to show up in the political physiology too. Doesn't mean that the RJD's change in stance and talking about jobs is going to fetch them
Jobs.
elections this year. If this
Right.
happens, then
So if we look at both the manifestos, actually jobs is at the center of both the manifestos. They're both offering, one party is offering government jobs, the other has promised to create about 1 crore jobs. Let me come to you, Dr. Bhalla. You heard Gaurav there. It's not, Bihar's economy continues to be Bihar continues to be characterized as a Bimaru state, and it's a lot of progress has been made, especially in law and order, and when it comes to infrastructure creation and so on. But when you compare it with other states, progress has been relatively slower. I want to talk to you about the importance of the women voters in this election and in every election that we've seen in Bihar. I think that's a constituency that Mr. Nitish Kumar has worked on assiduously, and that's something that the opposition has also been seeing as a vote bank to tap into. Now, the fact that the government went ahead and made this cash transfer right before voting started, how are you reading into that? And secondly, how are you reading into, which way could the women voters really turn to, which would they look at Mr. Kumar, or would they look at the young Tejasvi Yadav and the Mahagathbandhan government?
Look, before too many questions or too many issues rather, and
Sure.
let me take it one by one. So let me get first. I'm the odd person out. in that, Gaurav mentioned about the caste factor. I have, tried my best over the last 20 years in my writings to say that the caste is what determines voting behavior in India is not substantiated by anything that I know of. Due apologies to Gaurav. It just, it deserves a separate thing. I realize I'm the odd person out. And it's like, what Raj Krishna was saying about the Indian economy and Indian economists, that they are knowledge proof. And I think
Yeah.
in this regard, at least my perspective is that political commentators are knowledge proof on this. Okay. So that's the first thing. Um, Second, Bihar is not just a poor state, it's the poorest
Yeah.
state and has been that way. So, in other words, there's no doubt that it is the bottom. Further, there has been relative improvement, as I try and show in my article, relative to the second poorest state, which is UP. So, in other words, over the last 25 years, there has been a higher growth rate in Bihar, again, versus the national average and so on and so forth. So, they have, it's not the pits, it has been the pits, but there has been a. So I always believe in giving credit when it is due. Now we come to one interesting thing, which I hope, I attended a talk by somebody from the NDA, Samrat Chowdhury. And, he said, and this is the one finding that I'll write about, which is amazing, is that even Samrat Chowdhury, so in his speech, which was a well-crafted, very articulate political speech or campaign speech, and he said, the the opposition and Lalu's party and so on and so forth, they had promised X number of government jobs. And
Yeah.
what we have done? We provided more government jobs. This has got to be the most absurd thing that I've heard, that jobs are being defined in terms of government jobs.
Right.
Now,
Right.
I think there's a basis for it, and that is the government itself defines it in terms of a government job. So asking people, you want a job or you want a government job? So this is a government job. And I've
Right.
written several articles. Why wouldn't they? You don't have to work, there's no accountability, you get a very high real wage compared to others. So I think this is a fault line with all governments in India, including the present, that
Yeah.
you want, and then manufacturing. There was something you had. It's a national shame, our policy towards manufacturing, not just in Bihar, but in all of India. And which is why I'm hoping that the trade deal, if and when it comes about, will help change that, because the deep state is very much involved in keeping manufacturing down in India. It helps the major industries, etc., because they don't have competition. So I think larger issues are at stake. But now to your thing on women
The
and
women voters, yes.
and the women voters. Now, remember, the Nitish was the feminist or believer in women's empowerment. And Narendra Modi hasn't been that far behind. But throughout his career, and I think he does deserve a lot of credit, that he's emphasized women. Now, I don't want to give him too much credit, because he also brought stupid things, in my view, like prohibition, okay, which all it does is give some people a lot of black money, and which I think is absurd. So I think any time any evaluation is done of Nitish Kumar, He thinks that he's doing women a great favor by having prohibition. There are
But it
different
did win
ways.
him. But it did win him a lot many votes from women.
This
Women
is
loved him.
now. I keep saying to whoever is willing to listen, and there may be less and less people willing to listen, that in elections and most other, there is what economists call an identification problem. The identification problem is nothing succeeds like success, and then everybody comes with his or her own prejudice and say, this is the cause. Oh, it's the caste, it's the women voter, is this, we have to be slightly analytical in trying to attribute, and it's very convenient to say, but actually, as I said, keep thinking of what the opposition is in Bihar. And therefore, you can attribute it to the women voters, absolutely, and they are benefiting. And they would, you talk to them, I mean, you know, there wasn't great progress for women voters or for most people when the Lalu Prasad Yadav and the Mahagathbandhan was in power, and they were power for a long time. So that memory stays. Now, I think, so in that sense, really, in my view, the government doesn't have to do, the present government in Bihar doesn't have to do much. The opposition is so bad, has been so bad. And I think that's the major story of this election. If you had
Okay.
a good opposition, you would get a lot of challenge to what's happening.
Yeah, let me take that forward, Dr. Bhalla, and let me bring my fellow journalists into this conversation. Gaurav, you know what Dr. Bhalla said, that if the opposition wasn't this bad, it could have been a tough fight for the BJP, the NDA in Bihar. I want to get a sense from you on, when you look at Bihar's progress over the past, say, 10, 15 years, there is a lot that needs to be done. And when we look at the manifesto promises of both the political parties, they're somewhat similar. There is no imagination there, and they're both talking about, we started the show by talking about freebies. They're both political parties are focusing on freebies. So I want to, get your assessment, Gaurav, on what has held Bihar back. And why do we see this freebie narrative taking center stage in every state election?
Absolutely. Now, Shweta, first question, what has held Bihar back? I think that's a no-brainer. It is their leadership that has held the state back. In 2025, even after 20 years of anti-incumbency, if Nitish Kumar and the NDA actually romp home to victory with a comfortable majority, it is more a comment on the opposition, as Dr. Bhalla alluded to, than on Nitish Kumar's performance, because there are many gaps in the performance, and all of us know. Just to give you an example, if you look at, there are 38 districts in Bihar, and if you look at the per capita income, just the per capita income, Patna, capital city, is an outlier with 1.21 lakh, 121,000 of annual per capita income in Patna. And the next best district is Begusarai at less than 50,000, 49,000. So, this kind of tells you the story of where Bihar is. That there's a huge gap, there's a vast gap between the capital city and the rest of the state. It suggests development and prosperity in the state does not extend beyond a few pockets, leaving most of the electorate struggling. The reason all of this has happened is that successive political leadership in Bihar, regardless across party lines, somehow seems to be in a state of denial about the aspirational class, which is what I think Prashant Kishore's entry into Bihar's polity probably has queered the cauldron a bit, stirred up the cauldron a bit, and that is the reason you see in both the manifestos on both sides of the political fence talking about jobs. In fact, you see manifestos in Bihar this time talking about, very pleasantly surprisingly, about semiconductor industries, trying to turn Bihar into an IT and a startup hub, and rightly so. Why should Bihar be left behind? If you look at what's happened in Bihar over the last 10, 15 years, the strongest growth has come in infrastructure, and it's largely center-driven investment that has taken place. And of course, infrastructure, building roads, if you're connecting, West Bengal to Gujarat, the roads will go through Bihar. And so whatever the attendant multiplier effects that these had to release, they have triggered. But beyond that, there is nothing. And it's a sorry tale. Who is to be blamed? The political leadership is to be blamed. Now, in 2025, if you're still talking about caste and freebies to win elections and not talking about jobs, I think it's a question that the political parties have to ask themselves.
And specifically, Mahagathbandhan talks about government jobs. Mahagathbandhan is talking about promising government jobs. Yes, Dr. Bhalla, please come in. Yes.
Yeah, and they've upgraded to not just job, but government jobs.
Government
which
jobs,
I think
yes.
is one of the most negative things I've heard. And it wasn't so long ago, I don't know whether the opposition has brought forth about reservations in private sector jobs. So then you want to think as to why they might lose. Now, my strict forecast is that there'll be more than a majority for the NDA. But I've got a fallback peace of mind that if the opposition does win this election, the silver lining is that we'll be done with freebies determining elections. So then, in one sense, I'm hoping or wishing that the opposition will do. If they weren't so bad, I would actually be campaigning for them. But, so freebies are really bad. And I think this whole stress on government jobs and reservations is terrible. They should be talking about investment, now physical investment. We've had the living standards investments, etc., and has worked. Let's give credit, has worked. But time to get out of this.
So, Dr. Bhalla, I want to ask.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I want to ask you and Gaurav this question on when political parties offer freebies, like in this instance, they're offering even free power, they're offering cash transfers, they are offering MSP. So there is a whole gamut of freebies, right? Do they encourage voters to think differently? Do they encourage voters to think short term? Does this promote short termism in terms of their thinking? Because I think the voters are so disillusioned that we won't get good quality of life, we won't get clean drinking water, which is still a luxury. Clean air is still a luxury. So then, okay, if I'm not getting all of that, it's better than let me just get some money in my bank account, so let me vote for this particular party. Are we damaging the voter psyche, and our political party is guilty of that? Are we showing young people that all you need to do is vote for me and I'll give you free money? And somewhere we are really, hurting their dreams and aspirations. Dr. Bhalla.
It's a good question and a good point. But look at Tamil Nadu. Now, Jayalalitha invented freebies to the extent as a vote getter. And yet you find that it hasn't hurt the psyche of the Tamil population and their policies. They're doing very well. So I think it is a lazy, perhaps they encourage laziness by giving freebies. And some communities and some states rise above the laziness in order to actually be. So policy, it's policies that determine. A voter, you give me something free, thank you very much, I love it. But I think a lot of people, don't want, see how I phrase it. I don't think it's a determining factor of anything. It's bad policy, is what I would say. Now, don't blame the voter. I mean, getting something free, fine. But I think it's just the thinking behind it. It's so, you know, 70 years ago kind of thinking,
So
when we were
that's
actually a very poor country.
yeah, yeah.
We
Because if
were
you
a
look
very
at
poor country.
yeah, if you
So
look at the if,
nowadays, Kerala just announced that they were poverty free, and so, and India has progressed. And I think what I object to most is that these politicians and these, keep emphasizing freebies. You're emphasizing that we haven't progressed much in 30, 40 years, and we still need MSPs, and we still need free power. I mean, get real. I have no sympathy for politicians that endorse this kind of behavior. And unfortunately, almost every party in India does it.
Yeah.
So what's the
let me
voter to
bring in
do?
Gaurav. Let me bring
Yeah.
in Gaurav
So
on this. Yeah.
yeah, Shweta, the thing here is whether freebies before electoral freebies just announced before elections have an impact on the voter psyche. That is something that Dr. Bhalla has already addressed. It does not. Evidence bears out a completely different picture. Tamil Nadu is an exemplar of that, that characteristic. But what it has done over the last 40, 50 years is that it has kind of, and because thanks to all political parties in India, it has kind of transformed elections into some kind of an institutional transactional activity. You
Yeah.
are essentially telling that if you vote for me, you will get this much, and you're institutionalizing it as a transaction, which is not a good thing. On the counter to that, however, is that if you ask any political party, then they will say, and their think tank would say that one man's fiscal deficit is not a man's lifeline. But the truth is actually not as binary and simple and straightforward as that. It's far more nuanced, and that is why it actually comes from a mindset. The mindset we continue, and political parties are guilty of that. They continue to remain stuck in a mindset of deficit rather than a mindset of surplus.
Yeah.
If we were a deficit country in the 1960s, it doesn't mean we are a deficit country now.
Right.
We are in a state of surplus, and that the whole principle of giving cash handouts comes from that mindset. Instead of empowering people through opportunities, instead of trying to create employability, we are talking about guaranteed jobs in
Yeah.
governments.
In government.
Employability
Yeah. Yeah.
employability is a slow moving variable. So most political parties that are approaching elections, they would rather think that we are coming with only a 5-year sunset clause. So we'd rather promise and skip power for 5 years because there's no guarantee that we're going to come back to return to power again. And they don't have enough confidence in themselves as well as the electorate about how moving on to the lane of slow moving variable, which is creating employability, empowering people with employability is going to fetch them votes or not. So they're not very sure of themselves. That is why they turn it into a transactional activity. And as Dr. Bhalla said, this is lazy politics.
Right. I also want to get a sense from Dr. Bhalla on how is he reading into the high voter turnout in Bihar this time around. We've seen a fairly high voter turnout, and in fact today we saw a lot of constituencies where women voters are dominant, go to polls today. So how are you reading into this, Dr. Bhalla? Is it pro-government, anti-incumbency, or you think that this is these are just people of Bihar who want to exercise their vote, and we should not be reading too much into it?
You know, this is a universal phenomenon where women are doing increasingly well in politics, in business, in almost all dimensions, such that the poor man or men are left behind. I'm being serious. Why is that the case? Look, we all grew up with, in most parts of the world, and including the West, where women faced not a discrimination, but an unfair system, in particular
Right.
in terms of education. What has transformed the world and India is education. So now, what does a man have which is better than what a woman has? Nothing. And indeed, if you take the point that because the women have progressed, and whereas the men have been sitting comfortably, they have had to work hard. And you see that in sports, you see that in politics, you see that in every dimension of life. The women have hunger to perform. The men are too complacent, are too privileged to think about performing. Okay. So I think this is a universal phenomenon, and thank God for it, that it is happening. Now, coming to the case of Bihar, the kind of growth in education, and especially obviously of the youth, because you can't worry about those who are 50 years and above, etc., is transformative. It is, they are now within, I think, 10% of the average educational attainment of men ages 15 to 24. You can't take the whole population because that's not of concern. That is determined 30 years ago. So now, and all India, the average educational attainment of women ages 15 to 24 is equal to that of men. That's a transformation that is unheard of. Obviously, in other countries, they have had it. For us, it is what is really dominating. So therefore, women will. So we think it's a new deal or new event that women are participating. But this has been, if you track the education of women, relative education of always, this is as the most easily forecast phenomenon.
So you're
Now
saying that
coming
the.
to
Yes, please go on. Sorry to interrupt. Yeah.
now coming to, and it is the case that, as I started off this discussion with, that Nitish is the original feminist in terms of at least acknowledging the disadvantages women had and then trying to make it all equal. So it's not at all a surprise that in Bihar the women will come out in numbers and do it. And that's what I think is happening. Now, one other you brought up, a high voter turnout is normally against the incumbent because the belief is let's throw the rascals out and therefore you go out and vote. If you're happy, you don't want to throw anybody out, you stay at home, which is the incumbent.
Yeah.
I think this time it is not it is precisely the feeling of, or increased feeling of power, influence, effectiveness, as well as the fact that the Nitish's party, as well as the BJP, has done quite a lot for the welfare of women, all India, as well as Bihar. I think that's the big story in this election. It is women, but it is not freebies. It is that, excuse me, that they have been acknowledged and are now increasingly at par with men.
Interesting. Gaurav, I want to ask you, this is a state where BJP has not been able to do it alone. They've not been able to get the numbers on their own. Do you see that changing post this election, considering, we've heard about Mr. Nitish Kumar's ailing health, also anti-incumbency might be kicking in. We don't know that yet. But having said that, we do know that the BJP has been fairly focused on the state. And so do we see the BJP emerging as a stronger partner post this election?
No, if I have to respond to that question, definitively it will amount to calling the elections right now. I don't think I be able to do that at this point in time. But on a more serious note, if you look at, Bihar remains the only state within only states where BJP has been in alliance and hasn't been able to form the
Yeah.
government of its own, or have not evolved into the senior partner. Bihar is among the two states, is just the two states where BJP has not been able to. One is Punjab, of course, where they were in power, have been in power with Akalis for a long time, and have always been the junior partner. And the second is Bihar. We have seen that happen, evolve into the senior partner in states like Maharashtra, in states like Assam, where they were a junior partner with the AGP, and then now has become the senior partner, forming a government almost on its own. Maharashtra, there, the senior partner, and they are capable of forming the government on its own, and many other states. Bihar remains, if they win, and for the BJP, if you look by the sheer pre-poll arithmetic and the sheer pre-poll number of seats that they have allotted to each other, if the BJP has to be the senior partner, they have to achieve a win strike rate of about 80%, because about they have contested about 100 seats, 103 seats, I think. And if they have to win about 80 seats, it amounts to about an 80% win strike rate. I don't see that happening, because that would mean they are almost there on their own. It could be then, for that to happen, it has to be almost like a Maharashtra kind of a landslide, so far as the BJP is concerned, where the BJP swept Maharashtra in terms of number of seats within the alliance configuration. Having said that, if the NDA forms the government, don't be surprised. If the NDA forms the government with a comfortable majority, don't be surprised if Nitish Kumar is the chief minister and we see a change in the chief ministership for the BJP in a year or so from now.
Okay, all right. Well, we are almost at the end of this discussion, but I want to ask both of you this question. Either way, whichever party comes to power, from what we've seen, from the promises that we see, we don't really see a very promising vision for the state of Bihar. Like we've been discussing that the narrative has been focused on freebies. So, Dr. Bhalla, your prescription for the state, what according to you should the new government be doing once they're voted into power? Because if we just go by rough calculations of what they are promising, and if they actually have to deliver on that promise, it could amount, we are looking at an alternate budget for the state of Bihar. The overall budget of Bihar is maybe 3 or 4 lakh crore, and if we were to just calculate the cost of the subsidies and the freebies that both the parties are offering, both the sets are offering, it could be nearly double of what the overall budget of Bihar. So, your prescription for the state of Bihar, the top 3 things that the new government needs to address.
Yeah. Well, I'll start off with a forecast, since I've had my sophologist hat a long time. I think the BJP's seats, both the BJP and JDU are fighting the same number of seats. I think the BJP winning seats will be much in excess. Well, I don't know what much, but will overshadow the seats that the JDU gets. So that's.
So, you're saying BJP will emerge as the bigger partner in this election?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think the three, so I think the BJP amongst the 4 parties that are contesting will be their seats will be well in excess of the other 3, okay, including the 2 in the opposition.
So, any number that we can get from you, Dr. Bhalla?
No, look, this time, I'll say this, that I think, I'll give the following ranking. I think the BJP emerges as the number 1 party. The JDU is second. The RJD is third, and the Congress is fourth. So in other words, the people who will be disappointed the most, but maybe the Congress has come to expect it, will be. So that's my ranking of the 4 parties. And I think if the numbers turn out much in the direction that I think, then you will have, within a year, I think Gaurav said, that Nitish, partly because of health reasons, may not be the chief. So there is a change in the air. But in the forecast, I've lost track of what was your question that as
My
to
question was on the prescription, but before you come to the prescription,
yeah,
why don't you
prescription.
share the number of seats that the BJP, according to you, could win?
I
And then
haven't. I honestly,
you've
but I
not.
think
Okay.
okay, in an informal forecast, I had said um, that the NDA alliance will get more than 160 seats on their own. And this
Okay.
was before, on their own, meaning together, and which is two-thirds. And now, after having looked at and this was before we had the results on the turnout. Having looked at the turnout, I think I would raise the number of seats that the two of them get to upwards of 170. I don't think they crossed 204, but I think it might be the surprise. Now, in terms of prescription for policies, we have, and the PM himself has discussed, and we all believe in a change in mindset. And I think the BJP, including the BJP, has to change their mindset in order to get, this, as I said, it was a BJP that went and said, oh, we have provided more government jobs. I mean, that is not a change of mindset. Matter of fact, it's getting more and more negative. So I think, I believe in whatever has worked in India and the rest of the world. You want much more markets. Education has been done and continue doing it, absolutely fine. Healthcare is improving, but it's now time to get to productive jobs as well as a productive atmosphere, merit, not reservations. So the mindset in India has been of reservations. And I think you start changing that, move more towards merit. I don't care whether it is in manufacturing or it's in services or in software. All of them are an outcome of the mindset. And I think the leadership has to come from whoever is the ruling party. And it's high time they provided, and which is why I started on the note, I think of, I put a lot of, I put a lot of weight on a meaningful trade deal with the US. And we've talked about that before, that basically Trump is doing India a huge favor by insisting that we reform. We won't reform on our own. So
Okay.
therefore, if that happens, we will have a different debate.
All right. Let me get Gaurav also in on this. Gaurav, do you echo Dr. Bhalla's optimism for the NDA in Bihar?
Unfortunately, I do not have the experience, wide and rich experience of a cephalogist like Dr. Bhalla is. So I would not be able to,
Colleges can also be
160.
wrong.
Yeah, the 160 plus, of course, is something that I haven't visited Bihar, so I haven't traveled across Bihar. I would not this time around, so I would not know how many seats we'll get. But going by what we have been observing and reading at this point in time, I think the NDA has an edge. Having said that, all of us know elections can surprise us almost
Absolutely.
shockingly. And we have seen that
Right.
in our careers several times. On the prescriptions, I instead of giving 3 prescriptions, I think I'll just give one, within which the rest will all follow. Is that Bihar, like any other state in India, needs a very, very active private sector. This whole debate of jobs has to move away from government or political parties promising government jobs and creating jobs in the private sector. So it does 2, 3 things. If you have a very active private sector there, very vibrant, Bihar doesn't have a private sector worth its name, whether it's the manufacturing or the services sector, not even in the public sector, as much in many other states. Bihar needs an active private sector. And that private sector could be in services, could be in manufacturing, or it could even be in the MSME sector, which is the lifeblood of the Indian economy, by the way. So once the job starts getting created over a period of time, and very quickly, you will see the problem of out migration getting addressed significantly. Bihar's bigger, and
Absolutely.
Prashant Kishore has been saying why should boys from Bihar go out and work, and why can't they come back and get work here? The
Right.
reason is very simple. You need to have a very vibrant, active, job spinning private sector. And who's responsible for that? Everyone, from the leadership to the bureaucracy. And the market is there. The private sector just needs the right kind of environment and the conducive atmosphere to create the
Right.
jobs.
Right. I want to just go back to the point that was made by Dr. Bhalla and even by you, Gaurav, about the comparison with Tamil Nadu. Now, I believe, yes, Tamil Nadu, of course, has offered freebies, but they've also addressed the skilling challenge very, very effectively. So the companies that choose to move towards the south of the country is also because the talent pool that's available for them, and that makes it very viable. So just freebies and not substantiating it with other things, I think that's where northern states have lagged behind, especially Bihar, where the narrative has largely been focused on that roti kapda or makan, something that's been our election logo, a slogan for a very, very long time. And I think that's where Bihar probably needs to focus on now, because we do know that there's a lot of Bihari pride, right? And Bihar has so much to offer. But even within the country, when we think of, say, planning a trip, or when it comes to just talking about good places within the country, Bihar very rarely features, and I think that's very sad, because Bihar has so much to offer to the country and to the world. So thank you so much, Dr. Bhalla and Gaurav, for that assessment. Dr. Bhalla, we will of course come back to you on November 14th. And and I'm pretty sure that you'll be right, because you've been in the state and you've been a lifelong sophologist. So thank you for sharing those numbers here with us. Thank you so much for that assessment of what Bihar wants and what Bihar needs. And thank you so much, Gaurav, for that detailed analysis of Bihar's economy. And a big thank you to all our viewers for tuning in. Do leave us your comments in the comments section below. Of course, results will be out on the 14th of November. So we'll be tracking Bihar elections and the electoral outcomes very, very closely. But most importantly, the one key takeaway from this conversation has been that whichever party comes to power, it has to think beyond freebies and beyond doles. It has to think of getting private sector to invest in the state. It has to think of re-energizing the youth of Bihar. Well, with that, it's a wrap from all of us here. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back next week with another big story and another detailed analysis. Thanks so much. Bye.